This is BBC News. I'm Martine Croxall. The headlines at 10. President Trump leaves the G7 meeting in Canada, insisting the talks were very productive, despite major differences on trade.
No tariffs, no barriers. That's the way it should be. And no subsidies.
Mr. Trump is heading to Singapore for a landmark meeting with the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Tuesday. Awarding the chief executive of Network Rail as CBE is causing controversy following weeks of severe disruption to rail services. Also this hour, a striking display at Buckingham Palace as thousands gather to watch Trooping the Colour. The Duke and Duchess of Sussex take their place for the first time with the Queen on the balcony. Good evening and welcome to BBC News. Just to say that we're looking out for the Prime Minister Theresa May, who's due to make a speech any time now at Quebec and at the G7 summit. President Trump has already left the G7 summit in Canada. He left early, insisting that talks have been extremely productive, despite sharp differences over his decision to impose tariffs on some imported goods. Many leaders were furious over the move, which he said was necessary to protect US interests, but it sparked concerns of a global trade war. Mr. Trump left the summit ahead of his landmark meeting with North Korea's leader, Kim Jong-un. Theresa May is still there. We are waiting for her to make her final speech to the summit. We'll keep an eye on that and we'll go straight there when we see her appear. But for now, let's hear from Gary O'Donoghue in Quebec.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Not quite the grand entry the President is used to, but with the US isolated from many of its closest allies on trade, Donald Trump knew he'd be facing questions about America's new tariffs, and he showed little sign that any kind of compromise had been reached.
It's going to change 100%, and tariffs are going to come way down because people cannot continue to do that. We're like the piggy bank that everybody's robbing, and that ends.
Earlier, he'd showed up late for a leaders' breakfast on gender equality, one of the few areas where there'd been hope for some kind of meeting of minds at this summit. G7 officials are still trying to work out whether there's a form of words all 7 countries can sign up to, and there are hopes that fresh discussions between the US and the EU can restart in the next 2 weeks. The French president was one of those leaders who got a face-to-face meeting with President Trump. The two men enjoying a cordial, if not close, relationship up till recently. But the tariffs have upset the French too, though President Macron was clearly holding on tight to the hope that the rifts could be repaired. The smiles and the handshakes are all there, but under the surface there are still real key differences between the US and the other members of the G7. And that's not just on trade, it's on a whole range of international global issues. Donald Trump considered skipping this summit entirely, and clearly his mind has been much more focused on his next stop, Singapore, when he comes face to face with North Korea's leader. Gary O'Donoghue, BBC News, Quebec.
Samaya Keynes is the US economics editor for The Economist. She told us that Donald Trump is giving the world mixed messages.
You know, there's this narrative out there that Donald Trump really, all he wants at heart is a big trade deal, right? That's been, that's his instinct, that's what he wants. And that doesn't really tally well with his actions so far, which is obviously to have put up tariffs on steel and aluminium. So I think, from the perspective of these foreign leaders gathering in Quebec, I think it's hard to know what signal one should pay attention to from Donald Trump. His actions just don't really seem to be corresponding with his words at this point. If
we can just set aside those actions at the moment, though, how realistic is his vision of this free trade opportunity as he sees it, given that there are so many interests at play whenever world trade bodies meet?
Yeah, so he seems to be, requesting some sort of utopian zero tariffs, zero subsidies, zero trade barriers world. And that would be lovely. Everyone, I'm sure, would love that. But that's just not the reality that the world is in today. So, at the World Trade Organization, there have been attempts for, almost 2 decades to try and significantly slash trade barriers. This was the Doha round. That failed. It really hasn't got anywhere. And to be honest, the reason hasn't actually really been intransigence from the Europeans. It's not the other people at this G7 meeting who were the main obstacles to that. If you really want to reduce barriers to trade and agriculture, then actually it's players like China and India who are the main obstacles to that right now. And so, that again, there's this disconnect between who Donald Trump seems to be directing his message at and who the real obstacles to that are.
Everyone always says nobody wins from a trade war. So what's the impact of these tariffs that Donald Trump has imposed and then the tit-for-tat ones that follow going to have on American consumers?
Yeah, I think and the answer to this gets to the heart of why his claim that America can win from a trade war is such a strange one. So we've already seen tariffs on aluminium and steel go into effect, and that is at its most basic level, meaning that inputs for American companies are becoming more expensive. You've got very loud complaints coming from American business, the construction sector, the oil and gas sector, manufacturing.
Let's go to Quebec and hear the Prime Minister.
Our citizens and the need to protect our oceans. There have been some difficult conversations and strong debate, but by working together, we have agreed on outcomes to shape a better future. Allow me to set out how. Foreign interference in our democratic institutions and processes and other forms of malign state activity pose a strategic threat to our shared values and interests. Recent events have demonstrated the importance of a unified international response to send a clear message that such malign activity will never be tolerated. We have agreed a new rapid response mechanism to tackle this growing threat. We have agreed we must maintain the global norm against the use of chemical weapons. And we have agreed to strengthen the ability of the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons to attribute responsibility for chemical weapons attacks. I also welcome the G7's recognition of the need to maintain sanctions on Russia in light of Russia's failure to fully implement the Minsk agreements in Ukraine. We have agreed to stand ready to take further restrictive measures against Russia if necessary. On trade and the global economy, we have discussed the importance of the multilateral rules-based trading system as the framework for enabling free and fair global trade. But some people feel left behind by globalization, and not all countries play by the rules. So we need to show our citizens that the global economy can truly work for everyone, with the benefits of free trade felt by all. That means working to make the international system, including the World Trade Organization, operate more effectively. It does not mean taking unilateral action against your partners. Where we disagree with our allies on something, it is right that we say so, and air the issue openly and frankly. We have done just that at this summit, registering our deep disappointment at the unjustified decision by the US to apply tariffs to EU steel and aluminium imports. The loss of trade through tariffs undermines competition, reduces productivity, removes the incentive to innovate, and ultimately makes everyone poorer. And in response, the EU will impose countermeasures. At the same time, we need to avoid continued tit-for-tat escalation and maintain a constructive dialogue. As a champion of free trade, the UK will continue to support these efforts. What distinguishes the G7 is our common belief in human rights and the equal value in every citizen's voice, regardless of gender, sexuality, ethnicity, or socio-economic background. I'm a passionate advocate of improving education for girls around the world. And at this summit, the UK has announced £187 million of new funding to support over 400,000 girls in developing countries in getting 12 years of quality education. We have also committed to new action to prevent gender-based violence, abuse and harassment online. Following the UK call for tech companies to do more to help fight internet harms, they've already made significant strides in using new technologies to tackle online extremist content, and we now need to extend that effort to address the growing threat of online violence against women and girls. In particular, we are committed to new joint working to tackle the use of the internet to facilitate people trafficking for the purposes of sexual exploitation. Finally, we've discussed the urgent need for global action to tackle oceans pollution, which is one of the greatest environmental challenges facing the world. The UK government is a world leader on this issue through our 25-year environment plan. And here at this summit, we have recognised the need for greater global action and coordination on marine plastics pollution, including working with business, industry and non-governmental organisations to find innovative solutions. The discussions here have been candid and they have been productive, underlining the importance of continuing to work together to uphold the values that shape our world. The G7 is a vital forum for full and frank discussion between close allies. I want to take this opportunity to thank Justin Trudeau for his leadership in delivering a positive outcome. Together, we stand determined to create a safe, secure and prosperous future for all our citizens. Thank you. I'll now take some questions. Raghi?
Raghi Omar, ITV News. I'm just quite struck by your comments and the order in which you sort of laid out your, the priorities of the talks. And you speak very forcefully on a number of issues in which there are quite clearly differences with the United States, between G6 members and the United States. Very forceful about trade, expressing your deep disappointment at the unfair moves by the US. You're talking about Russia and the need to confront malign activities and interference in sort of elections in the West. When President Trump left here, you got the impression that, it's rare to find a G7 summit where the United States is so isolated from its partners on fundamental issues. Would you say that that's fair? And secondly, on trade, you've spoken about the need for a trade deal post-Brexit with the United States, and we now stand possibly on the brink of a trade war.
Well, first of all, on the the first issue that you've raised, Raghi, look, as I've said, we've had some difficult discussions, some open and frank conversations around the table at this G7. But the point of being here at the G7 is we are able to do that. We know each other, we're able to have those full and frank discussions, and by working together, we come to resolution. And that's exactly what we've done. And what you will see in the communiqué is agreed language in relation to trade. What you'll see in the communiqué is agreed language in relation to Russia and the action that must be taken. As I said in the comments that I made just now, we've recognised the need to maintain sanctions on Russia in the light of their failure to fully implement the Minsk agreement, and we stand ready to take further restrictive measures if necessary. So that is all agreed by us at the G7. Now, on the question of a trade deal with the United States, yes, as we've always said, we will look to discuss a trade deal with the United States. Obviously, there are limitations as to how far we can get before we actually leave the European Union, but we will be talking to the United States as we are talking to others. Vicky?
Vicky Young, BBC News. Just looking ahead to next week in Parliament, what's your message to Conservative MPs who are considering not backing you when it comes to the withdrawal bill?
Well, the purpose of the EU withdrawal bill is very simple. It's about putting EU legislation into UK law so that we can have a smooth transition as we leave the European Union. It is an important and key building block in the process of leaving the European Union. And I would hope that everybody across the House of Commons will see the importance of ensuring that that bill is not frustrated, because at its core it's about delivering for the British public on their vote to leave the EU. And some of those amendments from the Lords were trying to frustrate the action that the government is taking, is ensuring that we deliver for the British people. And I'm sure that everybody across the House of Commons will recognise that. And I hope will recognise the importance of sending a clear message: the people voted and we're going to deliver for them. Tom.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Tom Newton-Dunn from The Sun. Before President Trump arrived here, he apparently called you and Angela Merkel too politically correct, Allegedly, he tells his aides that he thinks you're a bit of a bossy schoolmistress. He was late for the summit, late for meetings, left early, and even disrespected Prime Minister Trudeau's dress code at dinner last night. Do you enjoy having to work with him?
Look, we have a very good relationship with President Trump. We work with President Trump. The United Kingdom has a very good relationship with the United States. If I may just pick up on one of the complaints you had there, Tom, or one of the comments that you had about President Trump leaving this summit early. Yes, he left this summit early because he's going to Singapore to sit down with Kim Jong-un and discuss the denuclearization of North Korea. That is in the interest not just of North Korea and South Korea and countries in the region there. It's actually in the interest of all of us across the world. Caroline.
Prime Minister, you raised concerns about malign state activity by Russia in the UK at this summit. How concerned are you by revelations disclosed in the Sunday Times tomorrow about the links between the Brexit campaign group Leave.eu and the Kremlin? And do you think that it's time now that these links should be properly investigated by the security services?
Well, I have to say that I've been here in Canada, actually involved in the G7 summit, sitting around that table, helping to agree this communiqué and discuss these important issues. So I haven't actually seen the Sunday Times story that you've referred to. I'm sure if there are any allegations that need investigation, then the proper authorities will do that. Kate?
Kate Devlin from the Sunday Express. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has just said, when it comes to trade, that Canadians are polite, they are reasonable, but they won't get pushed around. If that sums up Canadians, how would you characterise the British?
Look, we have had some open discussions, open and frank discussions, all of us, around the G7 table about the trade issue. That's the British, the French, the Germans, the Japanese, the Italians, the Canadians with the United States. What we want to ensure, as I've referred to in my statement, the fact that the EU, of course, we operate as a member of the EU, as we currently are, the European Union will impose countermeasures to the United States. We are a champion in the United Kingdom for free trade. We will be working with the United States and other countries around the world to ensure that when we leave the European Union, we're able to put into place free trade agreements with those countries. And that's important. We want to continue a good trading relationship with the EU, but we also want to take advantage, once we're outside it, of being able to negotiate our own agreements with other countries around the world, because I think that's to the benefit of people living in the United Kingdom. Kitty?
Thank you, Prime Minister. Katie Donaldson from Bloomberg News. You left London just as David Davis and Boris Johnson were throwing their weight around, and you arrived here, and President Trump has been doing similar. Do you think it's possible to be a conciliator in this world of, I don't know, silverback gorilla behaviour?
What I think is possible is to achieve outcomes, and that's exactly what we've done by working together here at the G7. Sorry.
Prime Minister, firstly, can I ask, how disappointed are you that neither Japan nor the US signed up to the plastics protocol? And also, if I may, yesterday you reminded President Trump that the reason that Russia was kicked out of the G7 was because it invaded Crimea, but that appears to have fallen on deaf ears. Are you concerned that he's simply not listening to you?
On the second point, it is, as I said yesterday, the case that Russia was no longer part of the G8, became G7 because of Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea. And as I said yesterday, if there are to be any conversations about Russia's future in relation to this particular group, they have to change their ways. They have to change the route that they're taking and the sort of activity that they're involved in. On the issue of plastics, and this is an issue that the United Kingdom has seen as a very key issue, as do others around the world, and we had a very good discussion in the outreach session today. It's something I know with Sky's Ocean Rescue campaign. It's an important issue that has been promoted in the UK, and it is what we have in the communiqué is agreed action across the board from all 7 members of the G7. There were some specifics, more specific targets in the annexes that were attached, and countries will achieve the actions agreed in the main communiqué in different ways. But we're all agreed about the importance of this and the need to take action. So I'll take a couple more. Brendan?
Thank you. Brendan Carlin, Mail on Sunday. How do you react to, firstly, the President Trump saying that we, the UK, but by implication, along with all other countries, are robbing the American piggy bank in relation to trade and trade tariffs? And secondly, how do you feel when the President describes his great relationship with the EU leaders here, he doesn't mention you by name?
Well, we have all been working around the table here at the G7 to achieve the agreements that we have achieved, and we've had we've had a very frank discussion with President Trump about the issue of trade and about where we all stand on this trade issue. We want to see free and fair trade around the world. We want to see opportunities being opened up through trade, because the UK certainly believes, as do others here, that it is actually through trade that we can develop economies, that we can see countries prosper, that competition is encouraged, that competition drives innovation, and that's to the overall good of people, not just actually very often in the two countries that are trading, but often that innovation leads to developments which are of benefit to people more widely. I'll take the last question.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Stevenson for the Telegraph. Donald Trump today made the rather extraordinary threat of threatening to sever all trade ties with the European Union in the event that the trade war escalates. How seriously do you take that threat? And do you have concerns he might pull out of his forthcoming visit to the UK?
No, President Trump and I had a brief word here at the summit about how he is looking forward to his visit to the UK, and I look forward to welcoming him to the UK. And on trade, as I say, we've agreed some steps forward that we will be taking collectively. It is important that as we look at the framework we have for trade around the world and the World Trade Organization, we all recognise that some reform is needed in that. Reform is needed to improve the processes in WTO, particularly on dispute resolution, which takes a long time, but also to ensure that it's providing the framework for the economies of the future. Thank you.
Other presidents, his predecessors, had failed to grasp. It should have been done, he said, this meeting with the North Korean leader 5, 10 or 25 years ago. Now he hoped he could make a real breakthrough. It was a mission of peace, and he thought that Kim Jong-un would also want to respond with the best interests of his own people at heart. What was really interesting, intriguing, I think, was that he was asked if he would judge success or failure, and he said that he'd be able to judge success or failure within the first minute. Actually, he said, if you meet someone for the first time, you can usually judge whether you're going to like them within 5 seconds. So this is really going to be speed dating diplomacy, highly unorthodox, and I think the ultimate challenge for Donald Trump.
James, thank you for your analysis. Thank you. The Queen's Birthday Honours list's been unveiled, recognising those who've undertaken outstanding work in their communities. Alongside the celebrations, there has been some controversy. Mark Khan, the boss of Network Rail, has been made a CBE in the same week that his organisation's been severely criticised. Joe Lynham reports.
Protesters on the march in the Lake District. There have been no trains to Windermere for a week, and some fear it could damage the tourist industry. It's a local issue caused by a wider shake-up of timetables in England. So what do they feel about the boss of Network Rail getting a CBE?
Just makes a mockery of the whole award system. You know, it's something that, I'm a Brit, I like to believe in that kind of thing, and that the people who get them have done something to deserve it, but actually this is saying it's not what you've done it to, you know.
Whoever the Queen and the government give honours to is none of my concern.
Look at the name!
Hello everybody. This is a really exciting time to be a part of the railway.
The man at the centre of this, Mark Carn, was not talking about his gong today, but others were.
I think passengers who've suffered enormous disruption this week will be incredulous, possibly furious to see Mark Carne being awarded a CBE. But I think it's really important that we're not misdirected into thinking that the problems with the introduction of the new timetable are all down to Network Rail.
Network Rail defended the gong and said people should look at Mr Carne's entire career and his tremendous contribution to the railways. Here at King's Cross Station, some services for Thameslink and Great Northern passengers have seen disruption in recent weeks as the new timetable is bedded down. Things are improving, but some commuters may feel that this public reward for the boss of Network Rail might be a bit premature, even if he has devoted many years to the railway industry. Joe Lynham, BBC News.
Well, the Birthday Honours List has recognised the achievements of more than 1,000 other people across the UK. Among them, the former Liverpool manager Kenny Dalglish, who received a knighthood. Emma Thompson, the Oscar-winning actor, has been appointed a Dame. Lisa Mazimba has more.
Player, manager and a figure who gave huge support to the Hillsborough families, Kenny Dalglish says he's hugely proud to receive a knighthood.
To get it this far and to come out and be getting the accolade of what's been awarded is very humbling.
Imagine your husband bought a gold necklace and come Christmas gave it to somebody else.
Oscar-winning actress and writer Emma Thompson becomes a Dame for services to drama.
The troops have been firing indiscriminately.
Among the CBEs, the award just below Knight and Damehoods, BBC journalist Kate Adie and businesswoman Jo Malone for services to the British economy.
I just feel on top of the world. It's an amazing feeling to be honoured and thanked by your Queen, country and government.
Becoming OBE's world heavyweight champion Anthony Joshua and footballer Jermaine Defoe. His friendship with young fan Bradley Lowery, who died from a rare form of cancer, touched the entire country. What would he have made of this?
He would have been posing for the pictures. I mean, it was a special relationship. You know, I think about Bradley every day. Of course, it was tough to see someone so young suffer like that.
The oldest person on the list becoming an MBE, 103-year-old Rosemary Powell, Britain's longest-serving poppy seller. She retired after 97 years earlier this month. Lisa Mazimba, BBC News.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex have joined the Queen and other members of the royal family for the Trooping the Colour parade to mark her 92nd birthday. Our royal correspondent Nicholas Witchell has been following the day's events.
3 weeks to the day since their wedding, and Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, were once again taking a carriage ride in bright sunshine, this time as part of the Queen's birthday parade, trooping. With the Duke of Edinburgh's retirement, the Queen rode in a carriage alone to Horse Guards Parade and the annual demonstration of parade ground precision by the 5 regiments of Foot Guards. No eye on the parade ground has more experience of this event than the Queen's. She first attended it in 1947. And notwithstanding the operation a month ago to remove a cataract, the Queen's gaze appeared as sharp as ever as the colour of the 1st Battalion, the Coldstream Guards, was trooped. The parade over, the carriages made their way back to Buckingham Palace. And it was as the Queen's carriage approached the palace that one of the senior military officers, riding on horseback about 50 yards behind her, was in difficulty. Police officers moved in to try to help him. Field Marshal Lord Guthrie, aged 79, the former Chief of the Defence Staff, fell heavily. He was given immediate medical assistance and taken to hospital. On the palace balcony, the Queen led the family out to watch a flypast by the Royal Air Force. Harry and Meghan stayed in the background. This was the moment for the younger members of the family, Charlotte and George, and in the middle their cousin Savannah. The flypast finished with the national anthem. Someone at the front giggled. The done thing on the palace balcony. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, at Buckingham.